Justification Lesson 9, the fulfillment of justification. We're moving now from, we've done the principle and the progression, and this will get us started on the fulfillment in Christ of this doctrine. We've seen the principle of justification, and that principle is that righteousness can be imputed. The substitutionary sacrifice, we've looked at it. This encompasses this idea that righteousness can be imputed. A substitutionary sacrifice, the imputation of innocence, the taking of guilt and paying the redemption price, the legal standing or position that allows God to declare the guilty sinner innocent. Right, so that was the principle, and this led us to the progression of this doctrine. In Adam, all mankind is guilty. Adam, as our federal head, has imputed sin to us, and so we are guilty. We're born guilty, we are born sinners. We aren't sinners because we sin because we are sinners. Not only are we sinners by action, we are sinners by nature. God promised to make a way of salvation for mankind, and Genesis 3:15 was the beginning of that, and you've learnt that verse. This way of salvation we have developed progressively, and this is how we did it. Genesis 3:21, the sin offering. Enoch and Noah walked with God, were just and perfect. We looked at them, we looked at Abraham, he believed in the Lord and he counted to him for righteousness. Then we looked at the Passover, the blood on the doorpost and the lintel in the form of a cross answers the Lord of judgment. Then we looked at the Day of Atonement and we saw God's courtroom and the legal case that has to be answered. So this lesson we're going to go straight to the fulfillment of this doctrine by Christ. The doctrinal pathway is so clear that we won't go to the confirmation in the prophets and the transition in the Psalms. We can safely go to the fulfillment. We could go and do the others, but we don't really have time. If you think that they need to be done for yourself, then you should by now have the ability to do your homework and do it yourself. So I'll leave it with you there. So let's summarise so far. This is God's plan of salvation and how it is to be achieved according to the Old Testament. God created man in his own image. He created man very good. He created mankind with a free will. Man, by exercising his free will, rebelled against God and fell into sin. God in his love provided a way of reconciliation. God in his justice required complete satisfaction for sin. So how could both happen? What could mankind do about it? Nothing. We saw this with Adam and Eve in the first place. We saw it every time we looked at this idea of justification. We saw that it was not of works, it wasn't by the law, it wasn't by anything at all that mankind could do. If God did nothing about it, then it couldn't be fixed. So what did God do about it? Well, God provided a legal avenue by which sin could legally be paid for and yet the guilty party go free. So let's walk down this legal avenue and we'll see an interesting thing here. It begins with substitution. A substitution takes the guilty party's place. Now, the substitute must be a man because the guilty party is a man. So we're looking ahead to the fulfillment, and this is what we've got to find. The substitute must be a man because the guilty party is mankind. And it was a man who sinned, so it must be a man who pays for sin. The substitute must be perfectly innocent himself in that he has never sinned. In his life, he is to never have committed any sin, not one sin. and then the substitute must be perfectly innocent on another account than that, in that he himself has no imputed sin from Adam. Now that's a big ask, but that's what's got to happen. It's got to be a man with no imputed sin from Adam. And then the substitution must be instigated voluntarily by the substitute. He must voluntarily take the place of mankind. It can't be something that's forced upon him. He must volunteer to do it. And then the substitute must die instead of mankind, and to prove this, his blood must be shed. The blood of the substitute must be presented to the judge on the mercy seat by the high priest in the Holy of Holies and plead the case of mankind. Right, this is the legal avenue that we have to walk down. And so it begins with substitution. Redemption. Redemption is the result of substitution. So substitution automatically leads us to redemption. Redemption is the paying of the price for sin by the substitute. This buys back the forfeited life of the sinner. The wages of sin is death, so the substitute becomes sin so that the sinner can become innocent. It's a matter of imputation. And this leads us to atonement. Atonement is the result of substitution and redemption. And so there's a pathway here, a doctrinal pathway. The substitute, in dying for the sinner, sheds his blood and gives his life to pay the redemption price. The blood poured out at the base of the altar and sprinkled before the ark and on the mercy seat covers sin. And that's what atonement is, to cover. And so God does not see it. God sees only the innocence of the substitute, which is imputed by the blood to the sinner. And so we come to expiation, because expiation is the result of atonement. Atonement leads to expiation. The blood blots out the sin of the sinner, and only righteousness imputed from the substitute remains. And so this is the next step in the doctrinal pathway. And this leads us to propitiation. Because the substitute has died, paying the redemption price, and because the innocent blood pleads on behalf of the sinner and covers his sin, and because this covering of the blood blots out sin in God's sight, sin is dealt with according to the law. Because this is so, God's righteous demands have been satisfied, so there is propitiation. And this leads to reconciliation. Because God's righteous demands have been satisfied, God and the sinner no longer have enmity between them. They're not enemies anymore. So there can be reconciliation. And this makes possible justification. Because God's righteous demands have been satisfied, sin has been dealt with, covered, blotted out, and because of the righteousness of the substitute who shed the blood and gave his life, mankind can now stand before God in the substitute, and God cannot do other than to find him not guilty and declare him righteous. And so there is justification. It's a pathway that we follow, an incredible pathway put in place by God himself. So now we discover another check and balance for our doctrines. We have discovered that doctrine is progressively revealed, the same as all the scriptures are progressively revealed. Now we discover that there is a progression in doctrine. One doctrine leads to the next. Each one is interdependent on all the others. If we get one wrong or out of balance, we will have problems with the others. This progression and interdependence is one of our safeguards when we study doctrine. We can actually look at the picture we get, the doctrinal picture we get, and see that there is this progression in doctrine. Like a mosaic, the doctrines fit together. Any missing piece or any piece out of place, and the picture is marred and won't fit together properly, and we'll very quickly pick this up. if we force it to fit, we destroy the whole picture. And this is a common fault that we find. People will say, I'm sure I've got this right, it's got to fit, I'll make it fit. Well, if we have to make it fit, it doesn't fit. And we need to look at it again. If we force it to fit, we destroy the whole picture. So now, having walked down our legal avenue of justification, let us see how Christ fulfills this matter as he claims to in Matthew 5:17 and 18. You've learnt these verses. They say, and this is Christ speaking, think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled. Christ is going to fulfill every jot and tittle of the law. And so we look back at our principle and our progression, and we've certainly put a lot of things in place that need to be fulfilled if Christ is going to be a perfect fulfilment of this doctrine of justification. And so we're beginning now to look at this fulfilment. Next lecture we'll go on and really set the basis for doing that.